Hey everybody, Evan Nathaniel Grimm here. I'm going to be walking you through September 2022 for all 12 rising signs. So let's begin. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the charts. But before I go through each rising sign, I want to give you a high level perspective on September. So regardless of what sign you are, this is a moment of what I would describe as a little bit of energetic whiplash, meaning that there's a lot of there's an energy of slowing down with all the outer and social planets in retrograde. However, Mars is in Gemini still, and Mars in Gemini, this is the most restless placement possible for Mars. So people are feeling this impulse to, vocalize their opinions, to debate, oftentimes very myopic things. People are feeling nitpicky, and people are feeling like they have to be moving quickly in some way, whether that's within the community, within the neighborhood, or online. There's just a lot of kind of hustle and bustle, but oftentimes within the mind. So Mars Gemini is just like really spinning the gears and saying, okay, what do I want to vocalize? What do I want to write about or read about? So people are soaking in a lot of information, a lot of content, but not always feeling like they can necessarily manifest it easily into the world because Saturn is manifestation, and that's continuing to scale back in retrograde. Pluto's transformation, that's still retrograding. Neptune is, really about trust, service, spirituality. Even that is starting to become internalized. Jupiter is our sense of good luck and growth. That's where we have to look inward now that's retrograde for that sense of good luck. So there's just a lot of, a lot of push and pull here. And then even Mercury for much of September is retrograde as well. So even Mercury, which rules Gemini, right? So there's a frustration there too, where people are motivated to act on, the things that they are mentally interested in, but oftentimes miscommunicating what that is that they want, or miscommunicating the facts of the matter. That's Mercury retrograde too. So I just see this month as a little complicated. It's full of mishaps, doubling back potentially on past relationships with Mercury in Libra retrograde. And again, reflecting on how you can push forward within yourself. And so looking less so externally. But let's get into the rising signs. So, for really September as well, when I look through these rising signs in this video, I'm kind of calling out the Pisces full moon because that's the culmination within September. That's really the crescendo that we're heading towards. And we had the Virgo new moon on August 27th. So that's an area where you wanted to build sort of a new routine or refine something in your life, like a process. And now with the Pisces full moon, as it usually is, but it's extra potent because it's next to Neptune. The Pisces full moon is a time of service, maybe, of trust, of release, of spirituality and creativity. So those to me are the themes of that Pisces full moon. And even for some people, it's about compassion. So when I talk about trust, I really talk about compassion and empathy as springing out of that. So with a Pisces full moon, it's like we can kind of surrender our attachments to something, or we can surrender a grudge that we have against somebody. And Pisces deals with forgiveness. So when the moon is this closely conjunct to Neptune, it actually can be quite healing for people. But for others, with a full moon being an illumination of something, it can be an illumination of the ways in which you have fallen into a trap, in the ways in which you have been placing your trust in placing unwarranted trust somewhere and in someone. So this can also be an awareness of the ways in which you've been deceived. And I kind of feel that that would be some people's revelation because Mercury is opposing Jupiter. And that can trigger all kinds of epiphanies and larger, more heightened states of awareness about the patterns in your life and where you want to go with your life, but also what are the connecting threads between things that you've been taught so far. And so I think a lot of people are opening their minds to new ways of thinking. This is really, again, it's triggering a learning moment here. It's really a learning moment where you're thinking big picture and also reflecting again on what serves your soul and your authentic self. I kind of feel those retrogrades can be good for that, looking and introspecting. And then on the Pisces full moon saying, okay, I've gone inward. I'm relying less on my boss or my parents or my friends to tell me where to go. I can kind of figure that out on my own, maybe through my own dream life, for example. And then now I'm willing to surrender an old attachment. So if I used to work in corporate banking and I was attached to the salary, this would actually be the full moon in which you realize I'm actually not as money hungry as I thought I was. And by the way, I'm actually ready to put my trust into something more timeless and potentially spiritual. So that's the beauty of this full moon. But again, I don't want to overplay that hand, because for some of you, again, Pisces can be about deception, and the full moon is awakening you to the ways in which you've been lied to. But again, no matter what the cause, the root cause is, ideally you can spin this full moon into a moment of healing again. So like if something hasn't been serving you, then you shed it. And then now you start to serve the authentic self within, or you start to serve a higher power or a creative muse that you know you can always anchor to. So it's kind of a beautiful moment here in some ways. So let's start with Aries rising. So Aries rising in September, particularly around this full moon, you do have Libra retrograding in your 7th house. So this is sort of a moment similar to what Scorpio risings experienced in May. This is activating your 7th house of partnerships. So you're doubling back on especially with Aries risings, you're doubling back on significant relationships, past conversations with partners that you are dating currently. And it's activating a different sense of awareness about yourself with Jupiter in the 1st. And so maybe you have the confidence now to trust yourself more fully by doubling back on a conversation that you had with someone a long time ago. So maybe that partner is saying, hey, don't you remember what I said 2 months ago? I said, you're actually, you're really set up for success in your career. I think you actually have the tools, you have what it takes. So the Mercury retrograde could actually be a positive thing where you're doubling back and remembering to trust in yourself. But that trust is generated through a conversation with a partner. But for other Aries risings, this is a moment when you are kind of stuck on a past relationship and you're reaching out to them again, or they're reaching out to you, and it's getting a little confusing. And that doesn't go well. So then you start to focus inward as a result, as a reaction, and start to say, okay, how can I build my own sense of confidence here? But then the full moon in Pisces is in the 12th house, which can be quite a spiritual or creative moment. So for some of you, this could be a dream that you have at night. So around this time frame, maybe there's a dream that activates an epiphany that now you can work with and distill into your art, if you're an artist or a filmmaker or a musician or anything like that. And it can also just be generally here an awareness of your spiritual side and reclaiming it if you had lost it, right? And then also learning to trust in that spiritual side over and above maybe trusting in someone else, because your Mercury in Libra in the 7th house could be a breach of trust with a partner of like, I can't trust this person. Saturn's in your 11th house. You feel isolated from some of your friend groups and communities. So now this Pisces full moon is almost a refuge with a creative force or with a spiritual force. But, for other Pisces, this almost is a little too sensitive and it's like a little too overstimulated to the point where you want to withdraw and actually escape from reality entirely. So my advice here is to really make the most of these downloads you're getting and to not run away from them, because this full moon could be tempting to, again, just isolate and withdraw and ignore the what needs to be done to actually manifest those dreams into reality. So don't get stuck in the dream world if you're an Aries rising, because that's certainly a risk. If you're a Taurus rising, this is in your 11th house, this full moon. So Taurus risings are continuing to face a lot of pressure in your career, by the way, and with managers and authority figures, and even like some miscommunication with coworkers is possible in that 6th house with the Mercury retrograde. But you do have Mars in the 2nd for a lot of you, sometimes in the 1st, but you are like motivated to earn more money, to monetize, despite some of these miscommunications and pressures. And so through your friendships and your communities, they're helping you to trust in something here. So someone, maybe you're at like a comedy show or you're at a backyard party, or you're doing something here where there's some mingling going on. And within that community, they're inspiring you to trust in yourself. They might be inspiring you to trust in your creative side. And honestly, for some, this could be a little dramatic in the sense that you're aware of how friends have not come through for you, or it's illuminating the deception and the lies and the manipulation. So maybe a friend comes to you with some type of information that exposes them as, again, deceiving you. So this could be a time when you walk away from a certain friend circle, and then again, you trust in a more harmonious, healing community. Even in your social media life, Pisces can deal with fame and dissemination. So I think if you're active on social media as a Taurus rising, this would actually be a good moment to really put some content out there you could inspire, because Pisces is inspiration as well and visionary kind of thinking. So you could inspire people. So I would almost post content. If you're Taurus rising, try to post content like exactly on this full moon. Like I'm not showing you, by the way, the exact minute of the full moon. So you will have to calibrate that. So the full moon is actually at 2:59 a.m. Pacific time this day. But I'm just changing the time to get the rising sign here. But somewhere on that day, I know that 2:50 or whatever a.m. Pacific time is not like probably ideal posting hour, but sometime in this day you want to try to post and inspire. So I think that's great. Now let's jump to Gemini rising. So what's going on for Gemini risings? And by the way, for Taurus risings, you continue to step into your true self with the North Node in the first. So Gemini risings are continuing to get serious about their educational life. The Sun and Venus in the fourth means you're entertaining guests in the home probably right now, feeling social in the home, beautifying your home. Mercury retrograde in the fifth, revisiting creative projects. That can be good. And you still have the North Node in your 12th. So Gemini risings are definitely having some pretty profound dreams and connecting with their spiritual side in a way that they never have. Because a lot of Gemini risings are skeptics by nature, because Gemini is an air sign. It deals with facts. So right now your facts are being challenged by more abstract, extrasensory perceptions. But you have this full moon pretty much in your 10th house, maybe some of you in the 11th, but, let's consider it a 10th house for the sake of, the house system here. I'm using Placidus, but if we're using like a whole sign system, which I tend to think in that framework when I'm doing like global forecasts, right? Because, I can't calibrate for everyone's individual birth chart, but assuming a whole sign system, I mean, the full moon is in your 10th. So that would also be a good time to post on social media to inspire others, but you also might be feeling inspired to do something different with your life as a career. So Pisces in the 10th really does mean that you go through time periods throughout your life where you're confused about what you're supposed to do, but this full moon illuminates maybe a more spiritual purpose, a more creative purpose, and it helps connect you back to source, because we're dealing with the zenith or the apex of the chart here. So it's like we're linking back to source and saying, I believe and I trust that there is something out there. There is something outside of my ego, and I'm willing to actually give up my ego for the sake of my career and do something more helpful and healing to others. And so you could have a very profound impact on the collective, on the society around you, simply by sending out ripple effects. So with Pisces, we're dealing with concentric circles of ripple effects. So what you do can impact orders of magnitude more people. So not just 1,000, but 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000. So that's the sort of the high stakes, high impact nature of this full moon for you. So I would also, just like Taurus risings, think about posting content around the full moon. This is manifestation. The full moon is when something comes to fruition. So I really kind of like that as well for Gemini risings. Now let's jump into Cancer risings. Similar deal, potentially. So Cancer risings are and sorry to double back on Geminis, you do have Mars in the first house. So you do have this confidence right now and assertiveness that I think will pay off for you. So it's okay to take chances like that, to put yourself out there. Cancer risings, some of you, like myself, as a Cancer rising with a midheaven in Pisces, this could also be on your midheaven, really. So if you're a Cancer rising with an ascendant that trines the midheaven, then this full moon is likely kind of like right on your midheaven. So not necessarily all the way in your 10th house, but it's probably on your midheaven. And so for Cancer risings, this is also good for posting content out and getting it out there, inspiring others through like a work presentation or any kind of public facing moment here. You have Jupiter in the 10th still. So people are kind of looking to you to teach them something. Mars is in the 12th, which can be tough for sleep, and also getting into unnecessary debates with people who are the 12th house is hidden enemies. So if I were Cancer rising, I would disengage with if you're Cancer rising, there are people who are trying to kind of provoke you right now. If you're a Cancer rising, people are probably provoking you, whether that's through email, text messages, voicemails, social media, phone calls, whatever it is. If you're a Cancer rising, you're dealing with a certain amount of that provocation, but you have to ignore it because the 12th house is, again, it's hidden enemies, and it's a little bit of a tricky house. So I could write a whole book about the 12th house, but my point here, just to distill this, is that you just want to disengage from those debates, because people who are debating you or trying to poke holes in what you're saying or what you're doing are merely trying to pull you into the mud with them. So they're starting from a place of lack. They're trying to pull you into the mud and as a way to gain power and oxygen. So you don't want to oxygenate your enemies here. Do not engage them. Do not give them any power. Just brush them off and they will disappear eventually. But just keep that in mind. As a Cancer rising, you have to keep a really even keel about your life right now. You really, and this Mars is all the way, it's in this 12th house through March. So I actually think Cancer risings, again, they have some of the most opportunistic transits overall, with all these planets in the upper half, right? So you're dealing with a lot of transformation eventually in your psychological framework, and subconscious, with Pluto coming into the 8th, Saturn coming into the 9th. You're again solidifying something as a teacher. The Pisces moon, the full moon on the midheaven, or maybe in the 9th house even, that's really helping you to illuminate your public image and personify the spiritual message and inspire others, and again send out these ripple effects. But then Mars in the 12th, it's a little bit of a bait. It's kind of like bait. Don't take the bait. Now you do have the North Node and Uranus in the 11th, great for social media, building networks and communities, especially humanitarian ones. But again, for some Cancer risings, this is in your 9th, this full moon. So the 9th house is also great. So taking a trip by the water, going to the ocean as a way to spiritualize and cleanse yourself. I think a lot of Cancer risings would do that if you have a 9th house relationship with Pisces. So let's jump into Leo now. Leo is... So Leos, you are dealing with still a lot of serious commitments, crossroads in your significant relationships. Saturn in the 7th is by no means easy. You're feeling judged. You're feeling like relationships take a lot of work. But this could be that time when you commit to that relationship. But I know that there's a lot of Leo risings who have ended relationships recently. But that is karmic, and that's clearing the way for something better in the future. So and make sure you internalize the lessons from that. If you lost a relationship, there's a learning moment. Saturn is trying to teach you something here. But otherwise, Leos are also having to recalibrate in their career. Uranus is destabilizing. So you're really thinking about alternative career paths. And you have a lot of friends here, though, with Mars jumping into the 11th house. A lot of friends and networks and communities helping you to ideate and brainstorm and think differently about your life and your purpose and your aspirations, which is the 11th house in a lot of ways. Now, this Pisces full moon is in your 8th house. So this is very psychological, psychic. And I think that you might get also kind of like Aries rising. You might be getting a download here very suddenly where you connect a bunch of dots. And it's like, now I understand a little bit more about why I keep making the same mistakes, because the 8th house is subconscious. So now it's like, why do I keep jumping into the same relationships? Why do I struggle with the same obsessions and fixations? This full moon in the 8th could help you bring that kind of capture that information, but in a very unexpected way. So through, a hypnosis session, through, just talking with yourself on your voice app, on your phone, and like kind of playing your own therapist. There's like these random bits of information that could come out, or something just that you see in the real world that just triggers a memory, a repressed memory. The 8th house is repressed. So you're digging up a secret and there's a revelation around it, and it's very healing with that Pisces energy. So you're ready to let go of an attachment that was very toxic. So I do think for Leo risings, you just want to accept that there is probably something that you've been hiding. let it out, take a deep breath, let it out, let it out. And I think that once you do that, you actually will illuminate what you want to do with your career and the types of partners you want to commit to. So it's a domino effect. So really kind of live with that and thrive with that. Virgo risings. This is quite an interesting transit for you. So you've been struggling with managers at work. I've talked about that. You've been having to work a lot with Mars in the 10th. You've been putting a lot of energy into the career, and trying to get away at the same time and take a trip. So a lot of Virgo risings have traveled recently. This Venus and energy in the first house, I like that. I like that a lot because this is attracting people into your orbits. You're embodying the energy of Venus right now, which is about beauty and harmony and trust and cooperation. However, this full moon in your 7th house could lead to it's a mixed message kind of thing. So for some Virgo risings, this is when you place your trust fully into a partner. This is maybe when you unify with somebody, almost like a soulmate energy. But for other Virgo risings, this could be a revelation that someone, a partner, has been lying to you. So it's kind of, again, high stakes. Either you're trusting someone or you're no longer trusting someone. It's a breach of trust. And when I look at, again, Mercury retrograde in Libra, there's always a chance here that there's something that comes out, information that breaches and compromises trust. So if you're a Virgo rising and the relationship you realize has been a lie, then it's okay, I think, because Venus is in your first. So you're landing on your feet and you're attracting new people and new relationships into your zone. And even if you keep the relationship and it's going well, even if you're like, this is my soulmate, then, you still attract more maybe friends into your life with Venus there. And you might be feeling more artistic and artful. So this could even be a time to create a work of art based on how your partner inspires you. So how does your partner inspire you with Pisces in the 7th right now? I really like how that could feed your artistic side. I apologize, I just jumped into a totally different time cycle. Okay, here we go. So Libra risings. Libra risings. I want to back up really quick about Virgo too. By the way, the Mercury retrograde will go back into Virgo, so there is a chance for miscommunication, and maybe that leads to a breach of trust somehow. But overall, I think Venus in the first is pretty good for Virgo risings. Now for Libra risings, Mercury is retrograding for a little bit here in Libra, and I think that can really lead to miscommunication. And I know a lot of Libra risings have been asking about when is the relationship going to come through with Jupiter here. But a lot of you don't have Jupiter in the 7th quite yet. In this chart, Jupiter is sort of there on the descendant, but for most Libra risings, if you're after that 5th degree or that 7th degree or that 8th degree, Jupiter is pretty solidly in your 6th house still. And that is more about heightened states of awareness through your daily routines, finding the divine in the everyday. Jupiter in the 6th house to me is not really the most like flashy Jupiter transit. It's like you're really just healing the body and maybe becoming more aware of like how your exercise routine helps or does not help you, your diet. You're thinking about like a lot of things there, but those are more mechanical operational things. So Jupiter would prefer to be in like a bit more of like a firehouse or towards the zenith of the chart, I think, or at, maybe towards the first house to bring in some confidence and opportunities. But in the 7th house, eventually we'll get there in January 2023 through the spring. And at that point, you will get some more relationships your way, opportunistic ones. And, for the meantime, I think you're being activated by the 6th house here. So for Libras, it's a little bit more about the 6th house with that Pisces full moon, which is, a state of awareness around, again, how your daily routine, similar to what I said about Jupiter, how your daily routine is inspiring to you, how, even you can incorporate your spiritual practices into your daily routines and create that connection between the mind, the body, and the soul. So building that trifecta. The sun is in your 12th, Pisces in the 12th. So I could even see how you would be focused on your spiritual side or even creativity. Now you still have Saturn here in the 5th, which I think is good for like manifesting a creative project at the same time. I think that in the 6th house is building skill sets. So maybe you're building skill sets around something that's inspiring you here. So if it's spirituality, it's like sixth house is like, how can I get better and more proficient? In fact, how can I specialize in a certain type of spirituality or spiritual practice? How can I specialize in a certain type of art? Like I kind of think that this could be positive, but at the same time, the sixth house with Jupiter here, it does also feel like you're doubling down on like, how do I improve my health routine? That seems to be at play. Now, Mars is in the ninth, so putting a lot of energy into learning as well here, and maybe even into higher education. So I think this is a big learning moment for Libras. And I think you're going to be, with Mercury retrograde in the first, you're going to be miscommunicating frequently, and that's going to be causing you to revisit again how you go through your daily life and what you really want to be chasing after. So it's like, I can kind of see with Mercury retrograde in the first, like people constantly like fact checking you of like, that's actually not how this works. That's not actually how calculus works. That's not actually how astrology works. That's not actually how you're supposed to mix a song. So Libra risings are actually facing a little bit of setbacks there. And so that's causing them to revisit, okay, how can I become a little bit more of a practitioner in this area? And so in that sixth house, learning to, again, either build a skill set out of something creative or spiritual, or, learning to trust in your capabilities in a lot of ways. But again, the sixth house deals with health. So I think for most Libra risings, it probably will be like revisiting, again, the health plan and the health routine in that way. So let's jump to Scorpio risings. You continue to face difficulties in your relationships with Uranus in the seventh. That's highly destabilizing and random. So some Scorpio risings have jumped into these incredibly exciting relationships, and others have jumped out of them just as quickly. So that's a little bit complicated, but what I like about this month for you is that the Pisces full moon is in the fifth house. And I think the fifth house, love, and Pisces just mix so well together because, the fifth house is really about your creative side as well. And it's like, what do you love to do? And how do you want to express yourself in the world just out of pure enjoyment? And Pisces is giving you a channel and a connection to source or to a creative muse to activate that, right? And so, Scorpio risings, if you have any artistic sides or musical sides, this would actually be a time when you would manifest that. You manifest that creation. It could just be the idea. Like, I had this idea for a new play or a new film or a new style for myself. So maybe I want to pivot from music to acting. And with Pisces being about inspiration, those creations could send out those ripple effects, right? So that's really positive. And then you still have Saturn in the fourth, which means you're getting serious about your home life and maybe having a little bit of a bottleneck with your family, but you're working it out. And by the way, quickly about Libra risings, you have Pluto on the IC in some cases. That can make you feel a little bit anxious about your family life and having to tend to big changes in your family. But anyways, so Scorpio risings, you also have Jupiter here kind of in this case, right? The fifth a little bit, but really also the sixth. Jupiter in the sixth I just talked about. Some Libra risings are dealing with that, some more awareness around your routines. And then you have Mars in the eighth. That's quite gossipy. I'm not a huge fan of that. So that is a challenge. If you're a Scorpio rising, you have to check yourself before you share secrets about anyone, because I think the eighth house with Mars there can be a little tricky, just like Mars in the 12th. You have to be very careful here about what you say, what you write down, what you tell people, because it can spread very fast with the eighth house being about the secrets, and secrets kind of can again spread around very quickly. But otherwise, Mars in the eighth is putting energy into investments, the financial life, assets, and even writing about very intense subjects. So I could see that connecting with your fifth house full moon. So you're writing, you're inspired to journal, you're inspired to write about what's going on in the subconscious, how have my patterns been blocking me, and then pouring that into a work of art in the fifth house and sharing that with people. The fifth house is about taking a risk to express the self. So take that risk, express yourself, express yourself around this full moon. And then I think after that, as the moon shifts up to the 10th house for you a few days later, or just over a week later, then maybe that's with that Leo midheaven, you're activating that creation in a new way. So Sag rising, let's jump to you. Sag risings are dealing with a mix. And sorry, Scorpio risings, you did have Mercury retrograde in the 11th and maybe the 12th. So for some of you, you're revisiting dreams that you've had before, or miscommunication in friend groups for some of you as well. So that could feed, again, that could really exacerbate the gossip issue. So Sag risings, some of you will have that Mercury retrograde in the 11th, some of you in the 10th. So if it's in your 10th house, that's actually miscommunication with bosses at work and in your career. So you got to be careful with what you say and email. You don't want to breach that trust with that boss. But for others, it's in the 11th, which would lead to, again, miscommunications in your communities and friend groups. So, that could be a little challenging. And on social media, by the way, the 11th house being about those online communities as well. Also, you have Mars in the 7th. That can create a quarrelsome dynamic with your partner, but also motivate you to put energy into the relationship, to go hiking or exercising with a coworker. And the full moon for you is really down here in your 4th house. That could be about repairing something in your home, like a leak, or moving, realizing you want to move by the water, or having a moment by the water that makes you feel at home. And also maybe revelations around deception within your family, or learning to trust somebody in your family or forgive them. I mean, that's a theme that I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this forecast, but sometimes the Pisces full moon is a time of forgiveness. So in that 4th house of, forgive of the family, it's like maybe you're forgiving somebody. And so the same would go for Virgo risings, right? Virgo risings could maybe be forgiving a partner for something. And, that would also be profound. You have Jupiter kind of in your 4th, maybe your 5th house. That's very good for expressing the self creatively, maybe even dates continuing to go well. Sag risings, also the sun is really highlighting your midheaven here, and Venus is kind of in the 9th or the 10th house. So that's, the focus generally is on the balance between your home and family and your career during this axis of Virgo and Pisces. And so, maybe someone in your family is placing their trust in you, you're trusting them, and you're forgiving them, or they're forgiving you. And that compassion is giving you this confidence to express yourself more in the career. So I think the career, apart from that Mercury retrograde, could go well right now in this month, just based on this ability to sacrifice here. Maybe this family member is coming in to help you out in a really healing way. So I like that, but it could also be the subterranean desire to escape. So sometimes that Pisces I see can be challenging because it's so subterranean and very internal. So you could have this internalized need to escape within the home. So, but I would not really vote that you do that, because you have the sun in the 10th right now. So you should really activate the career. Now, Cap risings, you have Mars. A lot of Cap risings have Mars in the 6th, but some in the 5th. Mars in the 5th, which again applies to Cap and Aquarius risings potentially. That's a lot of dates, communicating with a lot of people, maybe getting up on stage, making jokes. Mars Gemini in the 5th makes me feel like a comedian here, energy. But if Mars is in your 6th, you're focusing on exercise and your exercise routine, putting a lot of energy into that. The Pisces full moon could be in your 2nd house, maybe your 3rd house. But if it's in your 3rd house, then this would be maybe, learning, right? The 5th house is, the 3rd house is learning. So learning about something more spiritual, learning to trust in something. And Cancer risings who had the Pisces full moon in the 9th are also learning and maybe even teaching about spirituality, which is interesting. And, the Pisces full moon in the 3rd could also be deception through texts, emails, voice notes, whatever. So you want to be watchful for that. But I kind of like the Pisces full moon in the 3rd. I kind of feel like this is illuminating your path to learning more about how to trust yourself, or how to think creatively, or how to, daydream more productively. I mean, the 3rd house is just curious. It's curious. So Cap risings are becoming more curious to chase something that is creatively inspiring to them. And that you could also communicate to someone through the third house, to a sibling, or through those phone calls. You could communicate something compassionately of like, I forgive you. You do have Uranus in the fourth for a lot of you. That's a little destabilizing in the home, sometimes wanting to move homes. And also the South Node coming up to your midheaven for a lot of Cap risings, depending on the house system again. But you are letting go of certain authority figures, managers, parental figures here, and learning not to trust them. But I think the third house, I kind of, again, I think the third house might be a moment of forgiveness through a message. And then Mercury retrograde in the ninth for a lot of you, but potentially the eighth. You want to be careful about, you want to just build an extra time for travel, things like that. But that also applies to Aquarius risings. So who I'll jump into next. Aquarius risings, you definitely have, for a lot of you, Mercury. Again, this let me back up the time here. So again, for some Aquarius risings, it's in a different house. It's in the eighth. But again, for many of you, it's in the ninth. And so again, like traveling long distance, you want to build in that extra time. But for other Aquarius risings, Mercury's in the eighth. So learning more about your subconscious through a partnership. And then the full moon in the second house, this is really, reshuffling your value systems to be more spiritually minded, to value mindfulness and self-care and healing, and also to maybe have a sacred moment with nature. So during this full moon, if you're in Aquarius rising, I would go into nature, because I think the trees could talk to you right now, or maybe something in nature could communicate. That's where you get the download. And I think for anyone on the Pisces full moon, you could have an epiphany or get a download from something. But especially if it's in your second house of nature, it's like, this is where you got to go. I think this is where you go, into nature. This could be about financial complications where it feels like someone's deceiving you in a financial situation. So it's always about reading the fine print there. But Jupiter in the second, for a lot of you, it's like a confidence that you'll make money. Therefore, people are more willing to do that, to give you that. So that could be profound. But again, for others, it's actually Jupiter in the third, which is, really expansive learning moments. I like that. But Aquarius risings, just hang in there because you have Saturn in the first. So you are rebuilding very much still. You're rebuilding a foundation, and Cap risings too, to be honest. You're really rebuilding a foundation out of yourself here, within yourself. It's very introspective. But that second house full moon is teaching you something here about how your values might have been out of whack or out of priority, and how you have to think a little bit more expansively here about what you value, and learning to trust in, maybe even learning to trust in what you value, that if you don't value money as much as the other people around you, that's okay. That's fine. And then you do have for some of you, this North Node, Uranus is on the IC. So more about focusing on the home, and also like Cap risings, maybe surrendering some of these authority figures. But Aquarius risings, you are having a busy dating life, probably with Mars entering the fifth house eventually. So Aquarius risings, I think that could be this is a pretty interesting full moon. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a little bit challenging to translate Pisces in the second, because the second house is usually personal possessions and resources. And so Pisces prefers to not focus on the 3D always. So I think it's really about linking nature and spirituality somehow. So now we finish off with Pisces risings. Pisces risings, the full moon in the first, you're actually releasing something about yourself. You're letting something go, releasing an attachment to a certain identity that you had. Or maybe this is just actually extrasensory and overstimulation of like feeling your emotions so deep down that it's like hard to navigate that. So sometimes the full moon in the first can be a little overwhelming. It's like, I just got to withdraw. But I would encourage you as a Pisces rising to not do that per se, because Mars is in your third house or maybe your fourth house. So it's like, like in this chart, Mars is in the third. So it's like you're motivated to communicate with people. So have that communication. Say, I am feeling this way. I am feeling a little overwhelmed, and find a sounding board. Find someone who can be that sounding board. For others, Mars in the fourth. So really taking control of your home life. So rearranging it, or, taking initiative to do something with your home. But, the Sun and Venus are, veering into the seventh house. So meaning your focus is well on a partnership. So maybe a partner is helping you to trust in yourself in a different way and helping you navigate that overwhelming emotional stimulation. And the full moon in the first, I just think there's an awareness here about how you are connected to source, because you have Saturn in the 12th still. And really Saturn in the 12th is about losing and letting go of authority figures as well, and learning not to trust in them. Learning not to trust in them. So Saturn is like parting ways with, you know, any egoic attachment. So saying like, well, I was this person's husband or wife or partner, and now I'm not. Or I was a resident of this household, and now I'm not. Or I was this profession, I was a data analyst, and now I'm not. I was going to this school, and now I'm going somewhere else. So Saturn in the 12th is really shedding those foundations, but there is something for you, waiting for you. There's a lesson there, which is that let's place my trust in a foundation that's more timeless and spiritual. And with the full moon in the first, maybe I'm part of that. I'm a drop in the ocean, but that ocean is very important, and I'm important as well because I am cohering with everybody else around me. And that's giving me this ability and agility to make my relationships work in the 7th house. So I'm like, it's like you got to love yourself before you love someone else, right? So I think Pisces are learning to love and trust themselves, and that is cascading into positive relationships. But you will have Mercury retrograding in your 7th house at some point, similar to Aries risings. So there will be miscommunication potentials here in relationships, but I still think you land on your feet because of that trusting nature of the Pisces full moon, and shedding some baggage associated with yourself and no longer caring or being self-conscious about a certain identity. So again, shedding the identity and just taking a leap of faith, right? That is the Pisces energy. So again, and just to quickly give you a preview of later in the month, I mean, we do have eventually another new moon. So that's around, I want to find it here. So we will have a new moon in Libra at the end of September. I'm not really including that in this forecast. I'll do separate content about that, but you know, the Libra new moon looks like it's going to be about 2 degrees Libra. So that's going to be activating your relationships and partnerships in general. And eventually we'll have the full moon in Aries, but you know, there's going to be a lot of Libra energy heading into October, a lot of air energy with Mars, Gemini, the Libra stellium coming up, eventually Mars or Saturn, Aquarius. So I think October looks a lot more social. And then keep in mind, in the long run, we have to wait until, you know, later October to be getting a brief moment here of forward movement with like Saturn, Pluto going direct, but then Mars retrogrades. So that's a little challenging. And then we have to get into January to really get this forward momentum again. Really, like, you know, look at this. January 25th, I just picked this date. Look at all this direct movement. So right now we're at a bit of an impasse, but again, the Pisces full moon here is coming up. This is when you place your trust in something outside of yourself, outside the ego. Pisces dissolves boundaries, dissolves the ego. So we are merging with others, right? We're merging with others, feeling that compassion with the water energy, but also, again, realizing the ways in which we have been deceived, And so using that as a catalyst for trusting in something more timeless. Others, like I mentioned earlier in the forecast, can be forgiving people with that compassion, and becoming creatively inspired or inspiring the collective. So thank you so much. And if you want a one-on-one reading with me, please check my website. The link is below. If you want a 15-minute reading, I do those as well. And I'm teaching courses, so please inquire about that too. So thank you so much.